We've all heard the story of Stetson Bennett by now. The improbable journey of a kid from Blackshear who wanted nothing more than to be a Georgia Bulldog. A skinny walk-on turned JUCO player turned scout team quarterback who all of a sudden found himself with the opportunity every player dreams of. The never-say-die competitor who made some of the clutchest plays in Bulldogs history and quarterbacked the team to its first title in 41 years, and then did it all again the year after. He's one of the most unlikely heroes in the history of college football. But the thing about an underdog story that we forget sometimes is that it's a two-sided coin. I mean, to have unlikely heroes, there have to be likely ones, right? If Stetson Bennett's rise was so unexpected, then what was the version of the story that people thought was going to happen? This is Jamie Newman. Some of you might remember him, and some of you might not know who he is. That's not what was supposed to happen. See, it was a big deal when Georgia got Jamie Newman. He had been one of the fastest rising stars in all of college football, and the Bulldogs were looking for a new starting quarterback for the first time in 3 years after Jake Fromm declared for the NFL draft. The Bulldogs had a talented roster and were still trying to break the 1980 title drought at the time. They just needed a quarterback who could lead the charge, and plucked Newman out of the portal as a graduate transfer from Wake Forest. A former 3-star recruit out of Graham, North Carolina, Newman redshirted his first year at Wake and spent most of his next 2 as a backup to John Wolford and Sam Hartman. By the time an injury to Hartman in 2018 forced him into the lineup as a redshirt sophomore, Newman was virtually a total unknown. But he played well in the 4 games he started, and won Birmingham Bowl MVP after accounting for 4 touchdowns and leading the Demon Deacons all the way back from a 28-10 deficit in the second half. Newman beat out Hartman for the job in 2019 and continued to impress. He threw for nearly 3,000 yards with 26 touchdowns and 11 interceptions across 12 games, while also performing well on the ground. Newman led an up-tempo Deacons attack that ran the second most run-pass option plays of any team in 2019, though he was arguably even better as a drop-back vertical passer. He was PFF's second highest graded quarterback throwing in tight windows behind only Joe Burrow, who was pretty good in 2019, I think. Newman was an ideal fit for Todd Monken's scheme and announced his commitment to the G in January of 2020 over offers from Oregon, Washington, and Miami. And so throughout the early part of 2020, Newman was tapped as the guy in Athens. His dual threat ability was expected to add a different dimension to Georgia's offense, and he was even projected as a top candidate to win the Heisman Trophy. But then Georgia went and got another quarterback. In late May 2020, USC quarterback JT Daniels announced he too would be transferring to Georgia, and he had a waiver to play right away. Remember when you needed one of those? Daniels was a top 3 quarterback out of Mater Dei High School in California and got on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was still a teenager. He won the Gatorade Football Player of the Year as a junior in high school, and became just the second true freshman in SC history to start a season opener, as well as one of the youngest Week 1 starters ever, period. Daniels had some growing pains his freshman year, and USC finished just 5-7, but there was still plenty of optimism surrounding his future. But all of that came to a halt in the season opener of his sophomore year when he suffered a torn ACL against Fresno State. Backup quarterback Keaton Slovis won the job, and Daniels made the tough decision to say goodbye to the team he grew up rooting for and enter the transfer portal. So Georgia was set for a camp battle between the former backup trying to prove he could lead an elite program, and the former blue chip trying to prove he could still be the superstar he was projected to be. Daniels' health remained a question throughout the summer, and Georgia still had former 4-star Dwan Mathis, male delivery man Stetson Bennett, and true freshman Carson Beck competing for the job. But then, after the COVID-19 pandemic canceled spring practice, among other things, something else unexpected happened.
5 and UGA quarterback Jamie Newman opting out of the upcoming college football season.
Yeah, huge news today. Newman transferred to Athens from Wake Forest University.
Newman, after taking reps with the starters all summer, would not be playing for the Bulldogs after all, and would instead shift his focus on preparing for the 2021 NFL Draft, he said in a statement posted to his social media just 2 weeks before the season was set to begin. It was a pretty surprising decision, but Newman was far from the only player who opted out with COVID concerns. But while some of the other notable opt-outs like Micah Parsons, Jamar Chase, and Penei Sewell were all first-round locks at the time, Newman's draft stock was much more unclear, and this felt like a bigger risk. Newman later told NFL teams that a family member of his being affected by COVID played a major factor in his decision, and Kirby Smart didn't have much to offer in the moment when asked about what happened.
Yeah, it's really irrelevant, not important at this point in time. We're moving forward, and we respect Jamie. I respect Jamie. He's done a tremendous job. I respect any kid that chooses to opt out. But he came and let me know on Tuesday. It was a non-practice day for us. It was actually the day that we went over to the Hunter Holmes Academic Center, and he let me know. And then I think he announced it on Wednesday.
Details about the decision were unclear then, and they're unclear now. We don't know how camp was going for Newman or Daniels, especially since Daniels wasn't even healthy to begin the season. We'll check in on Jamie later, but now let's see how Georgia's offense did in 2020 after their presumed starting quarterback opted out just weeks before kickoff. Well, Mathis won the starting job and got benched 6 drives into the first game, and then Bennett threw 4 picks in a blowout loss to Bama. And then they both combined to go 9 for 29 passing with 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions in a blowout loss to Florida. So things are going great. The cries for JT only grew louder with each passing week, and he finally got healthy enough to make his first start as a Bulldog against Mississippi State the week after the Florida game. Daniels played well in the 4 games he started, throwing for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in his debut, and later leading Georgia to a thrilling victory in the Peach Bowl over Cincinnati to cap off the season. There was optimism that Georgia had their guy, and he started to receive Heisman buzz himself ahead of the 2021 campaign. But as promised, let's rewind a bit and see how Newman did in the draft. He spent that spring living with fellow quarterback prospect Trey Lance, I hope he pans out, and training with quarterback guru Quincy Avery. NFL.com had him as a 7th rounder, and some sites had him even higher than that. While he had put some good things on tape back in 2019 and participated in the 2021 Senior Bowl, Newman was over a year removed from playing real football at this point, and his draft stock was really anyone's guess. The top quarterbacks that year were Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Lance, Bulldogs legend Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. Quite the class. Although Newman was more trying to stand out among some of the other mid to late round guys like Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, Ian Book, and Sam Ehlinger. But I'll just rip the band-aid off now. Newman wound up going undrafted. He signed with Philadelphia as a free agent following the draft, but was waived in early June. For a quarterback who had Heisman hype entering the season, this is not at all how things were supposed to go. That's football for you. Back over to JT now. He was named Georgia's starting quarterback before the 2021 season and led the Bulldogs to a big Week 1 victory over number 3 Clemson. Only Georgia didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game, and the passing attack was really limited. Well, it turned out that during the game, Daniels got hit and it aggravated a painful oblique injury that severely limited his ability to throw. He was ruled out for the Bulldogs' next game against UAB. Stetson Bennett started that one and threw more touchdowns and incompletions in a blowout win. But Daniels returned for the next game against South Carolina and played pretty well, with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game where Bennett threw a bad interception. The next week against Vanderbilt, JT was unconscious, going 9 of 10 for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter as Georgia went up 35-0. Then he vanished. Daniels never started for the Bulldogs again after that quarter. Bennett claimed years later that JT, quote, took himself out of the Vanderbilt game, which Smart purportedly didn't like.
But then JT takes himself out after the first quarter, and he never went back in, like, the whole season. So I think Kirby was like, I don't think he liked that JT kind of tapped out or was like, hey, I'm not doing it. And then I played from then on.
Whatever the case, that was it. Daniels appeared in 3 more games as a backup while the offense kept on rolling with Bennett. The writing was on the wall, especially once Bennett led the Bulldogs to their first national title in 41 years. It was time for Daniels to transfer again. He entered the portal in January 2022 after Bennett announced he would be returning to Georgia for another year. As for Newman, he tried to catch on in the CFL with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in 2022, but it only lasted a year. He was waived in the summer of 2023 and hasn't played anywhere since. Daniels wound up at West Virginia for the 2022 season, but lost his starting job midway through the year and hit the portal again in December. He transferred, for a third and final time, to Rice. At Rice, Daniels joined a team coming off a 5-win season projected to finish 12th in the American Athletic Conference by the preseason media poll. He put up good numbers to begin the year and led Rice to its first win over a Power 5 school since 2013. But in the Owls' 9th game of the season, Daniels took a hard hit. He tried staying in the game and even threw a touchdown pass he'd later admit to having no memory of throwing, but was eventually pulled after showing concussion-like symptoms. That was the last time JT Daniels ever appeared in a game. He medically retired from football on December 1st, 2023. Concussions ravaged Daniels throughout his career. He suffered at least 4 while he was playing, 2 of which he said were deemed, quote, severe. He said in a 2024 interview that he still feels lingering effects in his eyesight and long-term memory to this day, admitting to flat out not remembering much of his time at USC. With their playing days over, both of these quarterbacks are now coaching. Newman currently works as a private quarterback coach, and Daniels as an offensive analyst for the University of West Georgia. So, 5 years or so removed from the Georgia quarterbacking saga of 2020, and 2 national championships later, what's the point of still talking about these guys? Well, I think what this story tells us more than anything is how unforgiving football truly is. Or in Newman's words,
it's a game of football. The game of football loves no one. You love football, but the game of football loves no one. It's highs, lows.
The second the Bulldogs won that title, and especially after the second one, both of these guys were reduced to footnotes, little more than trivia answers and remember hymns. Newman was once a Heisman favorite. Daniels was High School Player of the Year. In this sport, 1 minute you're the man, and the next you're not. No one but Jamie Newman truly knows exactly why he opted out in 2020. Maybe it really was a pandemic thing. Maybe he felt like Monken's system wasn't a fit for him. Maybe he just got some really bad advice from an agent about his draft stock. Maybe he felt like he wasn't going to win the job, or that Daniels already had it locked up. Or maybe it's just more complicated than any one thing. But we can only imagine what he might have been thinking when he saw Georgia's offense struggle to begin 2020, and Daniels not take over until much later in the year. Who knows what thoughts could have went through his head? It's not my right to guess, but it was probably tough. And what about Daniels, who went from being the next Golden Boy California QB to transferring 3 times and having to medically retire during his college career? It's truly some of the worst luck that a player has ever had. He could not catch a break. His story as a player will probably be defined by the amount of times he transferred, but I think that's a disservice. Injuries are what did it for him. And sure, both of these guys could have played better at times and done more with their starting opportunities. But I remind you that Daniels was 7-0 as a starter at Georgia, and Newman's technically undefeated too, like how Melo never missed a shot on the Hawks. Technicalities aside, it takes an unfathomable level of sacrifice and discipline to make it to the D1 level in college football. Years of putting your body and mind through hell, obsessively studying film, memorizing plays, no matter what position you are, quarterback aside. The game chews up everything you think you have in you, and then it bites off some more that you didn't even realize was there. And then whenever it wants to, it decides that it's done with you, and it spits you out. We talk about our sports heroes forever. And we should, it's fun. I do it all the time, as you can probably tell. But it's just as important to remember these guys sometimes, the legends who could have been, to remind us of just how perfect everything truly has to go. How few spots there really are in the pantheon of college football legends. Maybe they could have made better decisions at certain points. Maybe you think neither of these guys were ever that good. But even then, there's still so much other stuff that's out of your control. An ACL tear, a global pandemic, a series of head injuries, the guy who fills in for you going off and becoming a legend forever. We will never know what would have happened if Jamie Newman had come in and jump-started the Bulldogs offense in 2020, or if JT Daniels had been the full-time starter for that legendary 2021 team. Maybe they would have become legends themselves. Maybe they'd still be playing right now. Or maybe they would have both underwhelmed and Stetson still emerges anyway. But we will just never have the answer. And we were supposed to get it. If you went back to the summer of 2020, there's no way you would have been able to convince a Georgia fan that both of these guys' careers would end up as what-ifs. That's the bittersweet thing about a good underdog story. Sometimes, for someone to have an unexpected rise, it means someone else, in their own story, has to have an even more unexpected fall. The game of football loves no one. Thanks for watching.